Did you have something here? We're not ready for questions yet, but we could start with it. All right. I want to thank everybody for coming out today, and really this has been, since Coach Belichick and I arrived December 11th, this has been an incredible 60 days with a lot of support and a lot of help from the Carolina community, starting with everybody in the academic office with Bubba and Rick, and of course Lee Roberts, our chancellor. So there's a lot of people that have gone into the work that we've been able to do in the last 60 days that really go unnoticed, and we appreciate every effort. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're looking forward to it. I think the main focus for what we want to deal with is our program is really based on player development. I think Coach Belichick often said character sets the floor, talent sets the floor, character determines the ceiling. And so every player that we bring in, it's really about us developing. And that development comes from their ability to grasp into the system. I was fortunate enough to work for Coach Walsh for many years, and he used to say, the first year will teach you the system, the second year will develop you the skills of the system. Player development is really important. So of all the players that we signed going back to before we got here and to where we are today, it's really about integrating it into a team and developing talent. So that's the journey that lies ahead of us from this point forward. And I know everybody's going to ask what the expectations are. Our expectations are we're going to get better every day. That's what we have to do. That's what we're prepared to do. And that's all we can control. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Aaron Beard with the Associated Press.
Hello, Aaron.
You mentioned there's a lot of work ahead. You've gone through recruiting and hiring positions, but there was a lot of descriptions in December about almost like a mini NFL model in terms of what you want to build with the program. So I'm curious how much you think you guys have accomplished in terms of infrastructure and those things, and how much more is, or what is the next focus in that regard?
Well, the hardest part was getting all the people together. I mean, it took a while to hire the right people and put them in the right positions, the coaching staff, which is still ongoing, and we'll have an announcement about that later. But the reality of it is building a personnel department, hiring people are great, but then those people have to buy into what you're doing and what you believe in and how they're going to evaluate. So that's why it's ongoing, and we're learning more about the people that we've hired. They're learning more about what we're looking for in terms of talent. And so, like I said, everybody's trying to get better, but to set up the pro department to get it to work seamlessly is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort on our part.
Yeah, Chip Alexander from Raleigh. Just a GM in college. You've obviously been at the NFL, and now you're in college. In what ways is your role here similar or dissimilar to what it was in pro football? What exactly do you do here?
Well, I had an academic meeting today, so I wouldn't have had that in the NFL, but I would have had a different meeting. I probably would have had a security meeting. And so I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in it, in the sense that there's a lot of moving parts. There's way more names that I'm dealing with. When you work as the general manager in the NFL, you're dealing with one draft class. You're dealing with one free agent class. And you can prepare for that. Now you're dealing with the 26 class, the 27 class, the 28 class. So there's a lot more names to deal with. So there's more volume than it would be in pro football, but the job is very similar. You have to accurately predict the future of players' talent and their character. And then you've got to assign a dollar sign to it. And you've got to be able to have in concert the ability to develop the talent from within. So I think what we learned watching the Super Bowl is the same thing we've learned before watching the Super Bowl, that teams that can control the offensive and defensive line win games. And so from a team building standpoint, that's what we said we were going to do in December. We're going to build a team inside out, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And so part of my job is to maintain that philosophy.
Hey, Michael. Adam Smith with Inside Carolina.
Hi, Adam.
Wanted to ask you about strength and conditioning, off-season strength and conditioning, and obviously that's a vital piece of what you're doing and what that looks like, maybe the changes you all want to make. What does a pro strength and conditioning off-season program look like as opposed to maybe what these guys have been doing around here the last couple of years?
Everything we do here is predicated on building a pro team. We consider ourselves the 33rd team because everybody's involved with our program has had some form of aspect in pro football. And Moses, our strength coach, spent a lot of time, 14 years in New England. Training is different for football than it is for other sports. You need lower body strength. You need lower body power. You need to be able to handle the physical grind of the season. And so our training is conducive to what happens on the field. You have to be able to play with power in your lower body. So you have to train your lower body. And you've got to be able to have the right balance of rest, hydration, and nutrition, which we've been very fortunate to come in here. Our nutritionist, Amber, she's been outstanding. She was here before we got here. She's been outstanding in terms of helping the players understand what lies ahead of them. So our program will be one thing that's always been important to Coach Belichick is what happens on the field has to happen in the practice field. Practice execution becomes game reality is a sign that used to hang in the Patriots facility. And that's the same thing in the strength room. We're gonna do things that are gonna translate to the field.
Andrew Jones, Tar Heel Illustrated. A couple of prongs to the question here with respect to recruiting and scouting the high school players. The footprint looks like it's pretty much everywhere for you guys. A lot of offers in California, got some commitments from there. New Jersey going up, even there's a couple of kids from Massachusetts. Your room, which is a much larger room than it was previously, what is the process in scouting kids all over the place? And when you say player development, you're offering a lot of kids that maybe haven't gotten as much attention from other schools. So what is the vetting process that gets you to California and some of these other places offering kids that previously were nowhere near the radar?
Well, the first part of your question about we've offered kids that didn't have, I think we believe in our eyes. Brett Auerbach has a great saying, we get our information from looking, not from talking. And so I think if you trust your eyes and you evaluate players, it doesn't really matter if some other school wants them. All I know is from my 35 years or more in the National Football League, I've drafted players that weren't recruited out of high school. I've drafted players that had no scholarship offers coming out of high school. So there's always going to be a lot of guys that get missed, and I think you have to trust your instincts and trust your eyes. Our footprint, I'm fortunate. I work for a great university. I mean, this is one of the top universities in America. It's harder to get in this school for an out-of-state person than it is to get into Yale or Harvard. They don't take very many. The enrollment's small. So we have a great brand. I mean, we have this UNC logo is worldwide, so we shouldn't limit ourselves. I think that we can walk into any school and say, we're North Carolina, we have the greatest coach in the history of football, and we have a great university. Come play for us. I think it's a powerful message. And so why should we limit ourselves to just a smaller footprint? And it allows you to look all over the country for the players that fit you. So we're going to be a national program, and we're not going to back down to some other programs because we're in North Carolina. We'll stand on any firm ground against anyone.
Pat from Brendan.
Pat Walter from WRAL here. How did you guys go about assembling the group of quarterbacks that you have right now? And do you think that the week one starter is currently on the roster is still important for you?
I can't even imagine week one. I'm trying to get through week 5 of the off season. I think everything comes down to everything matters, right? So how we lift weights matters. How we prepare matters. How we go to class matters. How we handle our nutrition matters. So to understand how that all comes to fruition really won't happen until we start accumulating all the things that matter. And guess what? Everything matters. So, I think we've got some really good players that are working hard that we've brought in. Some of them aren't here yet. Some of them are injured. And everybody's going to get a fair opportunity. Coach Belichick and I have always believed in, going back to the Bill Walsh theory, it doesn't matter where you get picked, it matters how you play. It really matters how you play at the end of the day. That's all that matters.
Brian Murphy, WRAL as well, right here. How much do you envision yourself being the spokesperson for this program as compared to Coach Belichick, doing pregame, postgame, week of interviews, or do you think that's going to be a role that you handle or someone else handles?
Well, I think this program is built on the vision and the identity of the greatest coach of all time. And so, I'm fortunate enough to have worked for him for a long time, but philosophically, we come from the same school, and that school is about building a team inside out. That school is about physical and mental toughness. That school is about dependable and hardworking players. So, who's doing the messaging is really, it's his message, and I think he's going to handle a lot of that. Obviously, he's going to meet with you guys on a regular basis, I'm sure, whatever the schedule is during the season. But, my job is to just adhere to what the program believes in. I'm not the spokesman. I represent what we need to do.
Michael Lombardi,
Yeah.
You mentioned the first 60 or some odd days you guys have been here, be it recruiting, be it the academic side, be it whatever it is. What has been the most surprising part of this whole process for you and Coach Belichick?
First of all, I think the people in Chapel Hill are incredibly friendly. And I don't say that slightly. I know I'm a New Jersey guy and we're used to being treated rudely, but, nobody's honked a horn at me, which is rare. So I think to me, it's just been the gracious, the openness that the people have showed here. Not that that's surprising, it's just really kind of humbling. And I think that there's a lot of pride in this program. And there's a lot of pride in this university, and I think our job is to bring it out. And I think what we have to do is we have to honor those who've come before us. These screens here that talk about the former players that have been here, that's not enough. They deserve more than a screen. They deserve way more than that because we've had so many great players here. So I think we're going to have to pay really more respect to the greatness of this program from a football standpoint. We haven't won ACC since 1980. We're all aware of that. But man, we've had a lot of good players, and they deserve to be in this hallway. They deserve to have the spotlight. So I think in terms of what's been the hardest part is trying to bring out those alumni, bring them back. This is a beautiful facility, but it's not a home for the older players.
Hey, Michael. Michael with WCHL and ChapelGrow.com. Another college GM that I spoke to recently said that a lot of their job is reaching out to fans, reaching out to members of the community, facilitating conversations with them to build support from the ground up. Is that part of the process for you in these first 60 days? And if so, what does that process look like?
Well, look, I think the first rule of leadership is called management of attention. That means you have a plan. And the only way you can have a plan the only way you can lead people is to explain the plan. That's the job of any football team, right? I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I hate the process. Despise it with a passion. Thought it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life. We're going to lose to win. It didn't work out, by the way. I just want to be on record as saying that. But what I learned from that was, as stupid as it was, that people bought into it because they explained it. And so part of our job is to explain who we are and what we're doing. That's what the fans want to know. And they want to know what their program is because they want to stand next to somebody and say, they're building this at North Carolina. And they want to say it with authority. And so that's my job, that's Coach Belichick's job, is to keep echoing those comments. And I think once you get people to buy into your plan and you explain it, the second area of leadership is called management of meaning, you get people to follow you.
Michael, Rob Baxley, Fayetteville Observer. Have you guys mapped out a spring schedule yet as far as a spring game? And then walk me through a typical day for you.
We've kind of looked at a spring schedule. A lot of it's going to be determined on recruiting. I mean, we'll eventually make an announcement on the spring, what we're going to do spring-wise, but a lot of it will be tied to, we want players to come visit our campus when we're practicing, because I think we have a unique way of practicing. And of course, they can watch a coaching staff that's filled with a lot of pro coaches, but also watch a guy who's won 8 Super Bowls coach a team around them. So, I mean, my day is spent really on player evaluation, understanding. Right now we're building I call it a draft board because my brain's locked that way, but building a board so that we can identify who we want to sign, who we want to go after. And then a lot of it is part of it is we have to get everybody in unison. You're dealing with a lot of players, a lot of names, and who's contacting the players. I think the other part of this university that's been remarkable is because you're talking to somebody who's never been in college football since 1981. So compliance has been incredibly valuable to me because I am a walking disaster if I don't have compliance, right? And so they've been very helpful and they've been very good at telling me what we can and can't do because we're not going to violate any rules, but we got to know what they are. So my day is pretty much spent like it was in the NFL. Get here early, watch tape, study players, write reports.
Shelby Swansea with the Raleigh News Observer. Obviously, you guys had a very short runway for the past transfer portal window. How important do you see this upcoming spring portal window for you guys in terms of building a roster?
Well, I think every time you can acquire more talent is an important window. I think we have obviously more time to prepare for it, because we wouldn't have just gotten thrown right into it. So I think a lot of scouting is preparation. We won't know the names who are in the portal, but we'll have a better idea about what it takes to be in the portal and who could possibly enter, and then have an ability to evaluate them and really get things. The way you want to run a program isn't to be reactive. Al Davis used to say this all the time to me. The secret to any great organization lies in the ability to anticipate problems, not react. And I think when we got in here, we were reacting to the portal. And now we can anticipate the portal, which certainly will help us.
Michael, Tom Ashley, Inside Carolina. Obviously heavy on recruiting and talent acquisition. What has it been like with the current players? You mentioned building a draft board with the recruits. Are you guys starting from scratch with who's already here?
Yeah, I think to me that's been the most rewarding thing, is to get players to come in and buy into the system, right? Because we are, we talk about who we've signed, but we are one team. It's not like this signing class and some others. We're all one team, and I think we have to really do a good job of showing our players kind of what to expect and how the program is going to be different than it was in the past. And again, every program's different when you make a coaching change. So the players have been really receptive. I think that they've been great at taking the information in, and when coach is able to get in front of them at our team meetings and talk about football and what it takes and what we expect from them, I think they've been really good, and I think they've responded. Our off-season workouts have been good. The players want to be coached. I think one thing you learn about players, whether it's high school, college, or pro, players want to improve. And your job as a coach, whether you're 18 years old as a coach or whether you're 85 like Tom Moore, is if you can make the player better, the players will listen. So our job is to make them better.
Caroline Willis from the Daily Target. As you've gotten kind of accustomed to this job and the demands of what this program needs, what has been revealed to you about why it was important to have a GM for this program?
Well, you're asking me to justify why they hired me. I don't know. I think, look, football's a challenging, for one person. I think Coach Belichick would be better to speak about this, but there's a lot of things that go into building a team, and there's a lot of areas. And sometimes when money's involved, because let's be honest, money's involved now, you have to have a subjective way of determining how to handle the money and how to place a value on it. And you have to remove bias, right? I think that's the biggest challenge in pro football is there's bias built in internally in terms of I want this player, I want that player. And somebody has to be the voice of saying, well, we can find an alternative here and maybe we can't. So I think team building requires more than just one person. In the day when I first started in the league, it didn't, because we didn't have much player movement, much volatility. Now there is in all levels.
Jeremiah Holloway with Inside Carolina. Nice to meet you. One question that I had for you talked earlier about bringing in the different coaches and having them kind of buy into what Belichick is trying to establish as far as the culture. I wanted to ask about the specific assigning of roles and kind of communicating that to some of the players as far as which coaches along with certain positions. Just what is the process of delegating specific roles on staff, to those guys? Is it more based on their previous experiences? Is it based on just how did you guys go about delegating?
We're a head coach run program, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to our assistant coaches, but our head coach is the philosophy of the organization. That's the way it was when he came to Cleveland in 1991 and when he was in New England. We are always going to be built on a philosophical belief, and people that work within that philosophy execute that program and execute that plan in their own style, in their own way. Charlie Weiss was different than Josh McDaniels. Romeo Crennel is different than Matt Patricia. Nick Saban was different than some other coaches we had on the staff. But everybody that works on those staffs that we've had have all philosophically believed in what Bill wanted the team to look like. Because at the end of the day, football teams are who you want them to look like, right? If you want to be a tall team, you draft tall players. You want to be a fat team, you draft fat players. You know, it just goes that way. So that comes from the head coach. And so all our jobs is to execute the plan. And so your question is based, the coaches will have their ability to influence it, but it'll all be driven off of a philosophy that's been set in stone.
Lee Pace from GoYos.com. Michael, you have talked about the philosophy of building a program from inside out. What's the backstory on how that philosophy came about, and how has that manifested itself in what you and Bill have done together for so many years?
You know, the great thing about football is you can study winning on any level, and there's a formula for why teams win and why teams lose. And if you pay close attention to it, it's not that difficult. Football, going back to when Lombardi coached the Packers in the 60s to when, you know, Bill coached the Giants or Bill Walsh coached the 49ers, it's about who wins the line, who controls the game. You know, there's always two elements in a football game, who's in the lead and who's in control. On Sunday, it was pretty clear the Eagles were in the lead and in control. There was really no dispute. But if you go back to the 28-3 game against Atlanta was in the lead, but not necessarily in control. So the only way you can get in control of the game is through the offensive and defensive lines. And so if you believe that philosophy, that's building the team inside out, from the lines to the receivers. And I've been influenced before I met Coach Belichick by Coach Walsh. When we traded for Jerry Rice, we had the 28th pick in the draft, and we had just won a Super Bowl. And Freddie Solomon was our best receiver on the team. Nobody remembers poor Freddie, passed away, but was a great receiver along with Dwight Clark. And Coach Walsh walked in and told me to write a project. He asked me to write a report on 3 players, Al Toon, Eddie Brown, and Jerry Rice. And he said to me, when he asked me to write that report, he said, we are now finally in a position to go get a big-time receiver because the team's really good around him. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, we can get the ball to a great player now because we're good in both lines. And that's impacted me my whole life. And so when every time now we're in the mock draft season, and on TV, you'll see 42 receivers going in the first round as if everybody forgot about how the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Last 3, let's go Art, Murph,
Mike Marchansky from ChapelGo.com. I apologize, you might have asked this question before I walked in a minute late. What is the biggest unknown between developing, recruiting college players to go to the NFL and high school players to play in?
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the character of the player.
Nothing unknown about the development of the player.
If the player has the character and the will to want to be a great player, he'll reach his level. You know, one of the things that the Navy has always done is they've spent over $500 million trying to find out who can make the Navy SEAL program. They spent $500 million on it. They end up with 175 candidates to join BUD/S, and they end up with 30 at the end of the time, maybe 25. What they can't figure out, and we spent a lot of time talking to Navy SEAL, what they can't figure out is who can do it every day. Who can do the volume every day? They'll tell you at the Navy SEALs program, who's ever first in line the first day never makes it. Whoever runs the fastest never makes it. It's the one who kind of can do it every day. And it's the same thing in recruiting. We can never really get a true, accurate portrayal of the heart and the character of how important it is to the player. And that's the variable that we're always trying to find out. That's what we're always trying to ask questions. That's why we're always looking at the player and asking, you know, what's the most important thing? What obstacles have they overcome to get to where they have to go? Because we can't determine who can handle the volume. You can watch 5 clips on a player and say, that guy's great. But we have to make him better than he is, and does he have the will to be better? That's the hard thing to judge, whether it's pro football or college.
Right, WRL again. You mentioned several times money. How are you handling, you know, a de facto salary cap? Are you allocating based on sort of NFL percentages? And how do you know how much money you actually have to work with?
Well, I mean, we kind of have a collective, so we know what's in the collective. But in any system, you have to have any monetary value. You have to have a system, right? And so, if you're a starter on the team, there's going to be a certain value placed on what level of starter you are. That's why you have to have a grading system. You just can't arbitrarily say, I like this guy, I like that guy. We're not picking fruit here. You have to have a grading system. And so when the grade reflects what you pay, it's the amazing thing. Everybody says, this guy's a first rounder, or this guy's a second rounder. Well, that's insignificant. A first rounder makes X and a second rounder makes Y. So what you're doing is valuing the player, right? When you use those terms, when they do it on television, they don't value the player because it's not their money. But when you're picking in real life, you're saying, I'm going to give this guy a guaranteed contract for 5 years. He's worth X. Is that talent worth that? It's the same thing you're doing in high school on a lower level. So you have to be able to do that. You have to say this guy, so if a starter, he starts for 3 years on your program, he's going to make significant money. If a guy starts 1 year, he's going to make a little bit. The next year, he's got to prove himself again. Because every year, every player could leave. And so you have to have some kind of way, or else you have anarchy. You don't have any system. And that's why you have to have a grading system. That's why you have to grade your players every single day. You have to grade every player so you know what you're losing and what you have to expect to get back.
Aaron Beard, the AD again, and that leads right into what I wanted to ask you. A lot of what you're talking about, like your eye, trust your eyes, and all these things carry over no matter what level of football you're at. You dealt with collective bargaining and salary caps at the NFL that was far more structured than what college has been, sort of this, there's revenue sharing coming, but everything has just sort of been kind of fly by the seat of the pants across college. Is it really comparable, or is it significantly different, that part of the equation when you're dealing with money in such a weird environment?
So I think what we're dealing with now reminds me of a time when we had this thing in the NFL, probably before most of you, we had a thing called Plan B. I don't know what Plan A was, but it was called Plan B. And you froze 37 players off your roster, and then everybody else on your roster was a free agent. And so there's an element of the portal that's like Plan B. It was kind of chaotic. There was a long time in the NFL where nobody was sharing information. It was against the CBA. You couldn't do it. Today, you can go on NFL.org and you can see everybody's contracts, the agents have it and all that. So it was a little bit wilder time back then, and I'm old enough to remember that. So I think it's similar to that. So there's an element of Plan B that's in the portal, and there's an element of just true free agency that's in the portal. You know, does the guy really have this offer? Doesn't he not have the offer? And you got to make it. But again, it comes back to the philosophy, right? If you believe in something and you want to improve in that area, you're going to put your money where your mouth is. It won't be hard to figure out where we want to put. I mean, we're going to sign defensive and offensive linemen. I mean, we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.